right, so it's my pleasure to introduce our first guest. I'm very excited to introduce him. You know him from his long-standing career, first on A Current Affair, then for his coverage of many of the news stories that have gripped our nation. Everything from the OJ Simpson court case, to the LA riots, to 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, Michael Jackson, and more. He received the FBI's Community Leadership Award in 2009, produced the Emmy Award-winning documentary Colorado City and the Underground Railroad. He's been seen in feature films like Dumb and Dumber, and he now works right here in the Valley on News Channel 3 TV. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Phoenix Tonight, Mike Watkiss, everybody.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Your career is a mouthful, if you don't mind my saying.
Goodness, I don't know if that's a good thing.
Well, in many cases it is. I got to ask you though, when I'm looking at all of these accolades, how does...
All I can tell you is don't believe everything you see in the media.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I didn't fact check any of this, by the way.
That's probably a big mistake.
Wikipedia and IMDb is those are the only sources. I just had to ask though, of all the accolades you have here, of all of your media credits, how amazing is it that you are on this show tonight? It's pretty incredible, right?
I'm really near the end of about to retire from television news, and I believe that this is the high point of my career.
Absolutely. Did you hear that, everybody? A Current Affair, show that's been off the air for 2 decades.
I bet most of this audience doesn't even remember.
A Current Affair?
I do.
Tabloid bad boy back in the day with the great sound effect.
Was that the show with the logo was a triangle, right?
Yes, it was a flying triangle and a little bit of TV trivia, you know, that iconic sound it made. We called it the ka-chung. And
no relation to Connie Chung.
But although, boy, it was married to Connie Chung, so we had a lot of, that sound effect was made by the sound of this is a little bit of TV trivia.
Cool, okay.
We're dealing here tonight. You remember one of those old paper cutters that went shh? You know,
sure.
They recorded that and they recorded the golf swing. And they ran it through a synthesizer, and that produced the sound. Ka-chung.
Wow!
If you ever asked that in a try, I understand we have trivia experts. Add to your arsenal of questions.
Who thought to put those two sounds together?
I mean, who ever thought of putting a TV show like A Current Affair on the air to begin with?
Well, you say that.
It was a wacky undertaking, there's no doubt.
Sure, at the time, undoubtedly. Now, of course, it's practically the definition of television.
And you know what, and I remember when we first started with A Current Affair many, many years ago, all of the purists in journalism were, oh my goodness, how could this is the perversion of television. They hated us, they plugged their nose, they pointed the fingers at us, and we were really debasing the industry. And suddenly, as we became more popular, we found that network correspondents were showing up at the same stories that A Current Affair was showing and doing. And it was a moment that I think sort of changed, for better or worse, the course of American television journalism. And there were several stories that factored into that. OJ Simpson came along and showed us that you could go all in on a story 24/7 and find a business model to get an audience. And it really, and those were moments that solidified tabloid television and also gave the cable news networks really their license to survive, because they were struggling at that point. But with a show, with a story like OJ, they realized that there was a business model that you could go in 24/7 on one story and captivate the audience. And it really did change the course. It put CNN basically over the top.
Birthed HLN and
all of those things and then brought a healthy dose of tabloid, again, for better or worse, and my fingerprints, unfortunately, are all over it.
You mentioned OJ, and it's important to note that your news crew was one of the first on the scene that day.
The morning they found the bodies, we were racing out to some other story in Santa Monica one early morning in LA, and there was a heavy, one of those marine layers, and it was ugly, gray day, and I get a frantic phone call, one of those big old telephones you put up to your ear, and one had some crazy assignment editor from New York said, get to this address on Monday, because somebody, OJ's girlfriend or his wife, but he didn't even know the guy, he just knew that it involved OJ. A woman and a guy had been killed. We pulled up, and there were a handful of cops there, and saw Marcia Clark get out of a car, and before anybody knew who she was. I knew she was involved because she sort of raced towards the crime tape and went underneath. As she was going under, I tried to stop her for a second just to ask her what was up. Do you have a cigarette? And she looked at me with great disdain and said, I don't smoke. And but you know, I mean, in those opening moments of that day, so we were there when they found the bodies of Ron and Nicole, and went on to cover what I still think is covered hundreds of trials. That was the most significant for what it revealed about America, for the dynamics that it set in play.
Conversation about race.
Oh, it's just so much, you know. And I was we covered Tim McVeigh's trial in Denver, and Warren Jeff's trial in Texas. I still had big trials, but I still think the OJ was the most significant sort of legal drama that I've ever personally been involved with, and it was an amazing experience and a history-making one.
When you were there that morning, did you get a sense that this is something different, or was it just another?
Yeah.
You didn't know.
I think even in those early moments when, you know, because OJ had jetted off, give this a little history lesson, probably more than you want, but the murders had occurred and OJ got on an airplane to Chicago. And we're there in the morning, and they're trying to find OJ, and okay, this is his ex-wife. And literally, as these stories break, and you see it on the cables now, you know, they sort of get the facts wrong to begin. We didn't know what was going on. We just knew that we had this grisly murder. Got up there, and I saw that sort of river of blood coming down that walkway that has become part of the imagery of this story. Saw that, you know, and again, seeing the activity at the murder scene, and then over OJ's mansion over in Rockingham, and seeing Bobby Kardashian for the first time. Nobody knew who any of these guys were. Sure. And they were all going to become, and they also, you know, the cops, the Furmans and the Van Adders, and it was really, you know, and looking back in hindsight, I think, oh, that's probably when they showed up at the crime scene, and then their lives and all of our lives changed forever.
Absolutely. So when you watched, did you watch the
some of it? You know, I got to confess, I don't watch a lot of when they do these big retrospectives on stories I was at, because I find myself picking them apart, the things they got wrong. You know, I'm not a good audience for that. It's like being a reporter and watching a movie about being reporters. You end up watching all the things they did wrong, and you sort of miss the story. But I still watch some of the OJ things, and you know, and I think it's still an important story to look back on. You know, and now we're in this mode where we do all these retrospectives. We're doing John Bonet, which I covered. And you know, it's interesting to look back 20 years and you realize, from my perspective, that I'm an old man and I've grown old with all of these sort of big stories. But been very lucky to have been there.
Who would play you in the OJ? Who should have played you in that documentary?
Well, you know, and we talk about it in terms of the polygamy story as well. I think the only guy who has the track record that could play me is Robert Downey.
Robert Downey. Humble, Mike Watkiss says.
But he's had sort of a bad boy history. And I've had a bit of a bad boy history myself, so he would be my first choice.
Yeah, now let's talk about your bad boy history for a minute here, because you mentioned A Current Affair, and you were let go from that show.
I have been fired from every television job I've ever had, and I know that ultimately I will be fired from this job as well. It's just a matter of time.
Now, you've been at 3TV for a long time.
20 years.
What can you possibly do?
They're just slow learners.
There's a file folder on you this thick in the producer's office.
I'll in HR, I'm sure. You know, no, it's been a wonderful experience, and they've been good to me and allowed me to do a lot of work. And one of the things I'm proudest of here is the things that we've accomplished in terms of exposing the abuses in Colorado City and Hilldale and among the polygamists of the FLDS community. And I think that that work has been very important, and Channel 3 has allowed me to do all of that and go off on my sort of Don Quixote quest to knock over that windmill, and eventually, and we did. We're very cool, Mr. I think we have Mr. Jess incarcerated in Texas, a whole series of events sort of were set in motion, I think, because of stories we did, and that I'm perhaps most proud of.
Is it like we see in the movies where you're passionate about a story like that one, you walk into a producer's office or an editor's office, and you say, look, I really feel like we need to, and he's like, no, Mike, we need you to go down to the high school football game. And so then you're defining, you know what I'm saying? You're defining the...
See, and it shows you, I'm such a subversive that I don't even go in and have that discussion. I'm 300 miles out of town with a cameraman. I call him, I'm on my way to this store.
So yeah,
where's Watkiss? I truly found in my business it's way better to ask for forgiveness. Never ask for permission.
So the lessons we've learned so far is get fired as often as you can. And
you know, it's as traumatic as it is in the short term. I think anybody who has had an impact and been in the media for a while has been fired. And I think really somebody who has never been fired, I sort of look at them with a raised eyebrow and think, what are you doing wrong?
Wow, interesting. Okay. Well, in that case, Ash, would you care to let me go from this show now? Or no? Back to a current affair, because I do have vivid memories of my parents watching it, and I was watching it, of course, as a young person on the floor with my He-Man action figures, and then looking up. And undoubtedly, it may have been you in a parking lot somewhere getting a scoop on someone.
Psychological effect that had on a young child. I want to apologize.
Well, surely it didn't contribute to my sense of ego, needing to be in front of people, performing, or anything like that.
Not at all.
So you were fired from that show. Why? Because you had told me there's a format change.
No, you know what? You'll be fired for a million different reasons. Getting in fights with news directors is not a good career move. I can tell you that. That'll be fired. But this was more of a current affair. Had been on the air for a number of years. I'd been there for about a decade. Like a lot of shows, it got a little tired. We generated imitators. We had suddenly our hard copy and Inside Edition were really spawned because of our success. And they brought us all into a big meeting one day in New York, and they said, we're going in a different direction, which is TV code talk for saying that we've lost our direction. We don't know where we're going, but we need to do something completely different. So they fired all of the people who were most associated with it, and it worked out all wonderfully, and I have no hard feelings. Being fired really has, you know, it's true in television. If you stay on your feet, the door that closes, you know, another door opens, and this is really true.
And what was that moment like? Because, as you say, A Current Affair was just one of a handful of shows like it. We didn't have TMZ yet. We didn't have...
No, but I know Harvey very well.
No, yeah.
All of the same guys have sort of been recycled in this, the tabloid paparazzi industry in many of the same faces. But you're right. That was in the early infant stages of tabloid, and we were a wrecking crew.
Sure. So what do? You go home and think, okay, maybe I can go be a beat reporter at this network, or maybe I could...
Well, I got canned from A Current Affair. I was my wife was about to have her first child. I was down and out in Los Angeles, unemployed bum, and feeling terribly desperate. Some of my friends ended up at the TV show Hard Copy, and one of the producer friends of mine called up and said, "Come do a freelance package for us. Just go out. You'll be behind the air producer." So they sent me out to ambush a guy. A man was selling snake oil on television late at night, commercials saying, I have an elixir that will cure everything from cancer to hangnails. We went out and ambushed him, so I'm just going to go get an interview with this guy because he wouldn't do an interview with us. They sent me to Salt Lake City. I've been living in Los Angeles. They sent me to Salt Lake City, which happens to be my hometown. So it was a great trip. I got to see my mom and dad. I went and saw a jazz game, and then I ambushed this old man. And I'm talking to him. Well, the old man, I said, "Sir, can we talk to you about this elixir?" And I don't have a word out of my mouth. This old guy throws a punch at me. So now it's great television. Now it's money. And I discerned you, and I was he was slow, and I was able to move, but it made great sense. He throws a couple of haymakers at me, and then gets in his car. I go back to Hollywood with this video, and I was just going to be an off-air producer, hand over this interview, somebody else is going to write it, but now we have the ambush where the guy goes nuts. And in television, that's money. So they suddenly started running a bunch of ads. Our producer, Mike Watkiss, goes out and confronts this guy. So suddenly, I'm working for a show that I really don't even work for because they're promoting me as ambushing this guy.
Sure.
And
this is before YouTube. This is before you could see a
this
dozen
is
fist fights.
22 years ago.
Yeah,
22.
so
anyhow, this is 20 plus years ago. So anyhow, the bottom line is they run this story where the old man throws the punch at me. They run it over and over again because that's what television does. And the following morning after this ran on national television, the news director at Channel 3 calls the little cubicle I'm in at Paramount Studios in Hollywood and says, "Hey, we saw you get punched on television last night. That was great. Come work for us." So literally, I got this job because I got punched on television. And I call it not the hand of fate, I call it the fist of fate. Really, it's been all the difference. Say this, and I mean this truly, if I could find that old man today, I'd give him a kiss.
Wow.
Because it would be great for my career and my family and everything.
But whatever happened to the elixir? That's what I want to know. Did it work?
I got a flask here. I'm still using that stuff.
And so you mentioned Salt Lake, so you're a native of Salt Lake.
Born and raised in Salt Lake.
You end up here in Phoenix, so you're truly a Southwestern guy.
Well, I'm definitely a Southwestern kid.
You went to school and you have your bachelor's in anthropology.
Yes, sir.
And then a master's in journalism. So truly a student of humanity, of mankind.
Well, I like the sound of that.
Thank you.
I look at myself as sort of a classically trained musician who prefers to play rock and roll.
Okay. Unpack that a little bit. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, you know, whatever I think was pleased with the education I got because I think it has helped me. Studying anthropology is really the study of people in a community setting. Basically, what does a community as an organism require to survive? One of those sort of soft, liberal studies that most people would say is not very applicable and is not going to get you a job. It's been very helpful for me. Mm-hmm. Getting a master's degree in journalism was also helpful.
But seems like a natural progression from anthropology when you put it that way. When I saw the two coupled together,
and this documentary we did, there's a unit of study in anthropology. It's called the ethnography. It basically looks as a culture, and that's what I feel like I've done over the years with the polygamous community. Look at it as a community with the mechanisms that it has employed to sustain itself, from the underage marriages to the throwing out of the little boys. It works to achieve the goals they want. And telling those stories from sort of a journalistic perspective, I think has certainly been a natural progression for me.
Sure. Can anything surprise you anymore? The breadth of stories you've covered?
Just the acts of kindness.
Wow.
To be honest with you,
sure.
I really have covered enough murders to fill up a big city cemetery. Been in more crime scenes than most cops, and been involved in more courtroom dramas than Perry Mason and Matlock. I've seen that stuff. So now it's really when people are quiet and listen and are kind, because unfortunately I don't see much of that in my day-to-day life. And so when I do see it, it still renews my soul that there's some good in the world.
Cool. I couldn't help but notice on your resume you toured with Michael Jackson a little bit.
Well, when the scandal first broke, when he was first charged with some sort of inappropriate activity with children, he was just launching the Dangerous tour, which was this monumental thing. And he was on the road. The LA Times breaks the story about these accusations that this little boy was making for the first time again 25 years ago. Next thing I know, I'm being same news director, same guy who called me about OJ. Get on it. We understand that Elizabeth Taylor is about to get on an airplane at LAX and go to Singapore to be with Michael. Get on that airplane if she's on the plane. If she's not, don't waste the money. So thank God this was before the TSA, because my cameraman and I are literally bought $1,000 ticket, several $1,000 tickets to fly first class in Singapore Air from LAX to Singapore if Elizabeth gets on the plane. So we're literally standing in the taxi, the walkway, with one foot in the airplane, one foot in the waiting, and these stewardesses and assistants are beside themselves because we're not getting in. All of a sudden we see it, and you got to go take your seat, but we're not even sure we're going to go. Again, we never get away with it. There was a TSA, but finally a limo pulls up. Elizabeth, Larry Fortensky, husband at the time, and a really scary bodyguard. get out of a limo on the tarmac, get into the airplane through some stairs, and we jump on and we fly to, and then we spend the next 22 hours basically locked in first class with Elizabeth Taylor, her mean bodyguard and her husband.
Wow.
Flying to Michael Jackson. That was the beginning of what ended up being almost a year on the road with Michael Jackson. After negotiating with Miss Taylor that we were either going to shove a camera in her face now or she could do an interview before we got off, she said, let's do that. She was very gracious. When we got on the ground, we did an interview with Elizabeth Taylor, and then went and saw the Dangerous tour twice in Singapore, and then the thing fell apart, and Michael Jackson's problems began.
Wow, so you were there right at the cusp of... I didn't realize it was that close to it. I thought maybe you just, using your connections, decided, I'm going to tour with Michael Jackson.
Oh,
I've done so much.
You know, we did, and then they moved to Mexico, and then he went to Europe, and we were on the road literally for a better part of a year chasing.
Unbelievable. That's unbelievable. You really at the cusp of every significant story that has shaped pop culture, mainly, but also politics with the LA riots and 9/11, Hurricane Katrina was political in nature at the end of it.
Oh, there's no question about it.
So yeah. Wow.
I tell people I don't cover politics because I prefer covering killers and criminals to politicians, because I generally find killers and criminals to be a higher class of people. So I don't overtly cover politics, but you're right, there's a mixture of politics and everything.
So what's your take on the Donald Trump phenomenon?
You know, again, it's just, I have survived as long as I did, not being overtly political. I think it's a flaming mess.
Sure. Have you ever spoken to him? Interviewed
No,
him?
I've never interviewed him.
In the current affair days?
We one time punked him on a current affair. Gorbachev was in town in New York. This is when I worked in the New York office. Was speaking at the UN, the real Gorbachev. We got a Gorbachev look-alike, and one of my reporter friends put him in a limo and drove him to Trump Tower. Word got out that it was Gorbachev showing up to meet Donald Trump. We had cameras rolling. They got this reporter, this big bear-like Australian funny character, gets out with this little Gorbachev look-alike, and Mr. Trump hears this and comes rushing out like he's being greeted by a head of state in front of Trump Tower. And it took him all of glad handing and everything, and it took him all of about 3 minutes as the cameras were rolling. And I don't know whatever happened to this clip of video, but Trump, you could see, sort of realized, I've just been punked. This is an imitator, and he probably went back into it, but it was a great moment.
Sure.
It was a very funny
And people say Trump doesn't know about international politics. He was able to recognize that imposter. That's what we need in a president.
After about 5 minutes, he was definitely able to recognize
After about 5 minutes. That's presidential material right there. It would have taken Hillary 5.5 to 6 minutes at least, and that's when a national disaster. That's when a national disaster occurs right there in that span of 30 seconds. So, oh, you were in Dumb and Dumber too. How can I not mention that? In what capacity? Which one were you? No, in what capacity were you?
I was the unbilled brother, the dumbest. I actually played myself, a current affair reporter, in a 30-second clip of Dumb and Dumber. That is just, and for younger people, they don't have any idea what I've done. It is the one and only thing. That is the high point of my career.
Well, it definitely gets you an IMDb page, but I think you are underselling your impact on the news media and pop culture. Like I said, I mean, all of these stories are phenomenally influential in our generation and definitely beyond. And I think when people look back, I truly believe this, that your name will be on a short list of folks that was on the front lines, that defined a voice, that defined a perspective. So what do you want to be remembered for the most out of all of this stuff? I mean,
the older I get, honestly, this is not funny, but it's what I want to be remembered for is being a good dad.
Which is the batteries up our numbers.
Day-to-day process, but I'm proud of the polygamy thing. This is what's going on.
So we pull that video, isolate it. We got him for life with that one, people.
Rightfully so, because it basically has been sort of my little deal. My wife and I grew up in Utah. We had polygamous ancestors, sort of knew what the abuses that went on there. The young women forced into these marriages with old men deprived of any education. Young boys being systematically driven out of the communities, so you old men can have 8 wives. It's a cruel system. I think we put a light on it and really did start a series of actions or dominoes falling that has led to the first real accountability, you know, with the federal government coming in and suing them, Warren Jeffs being incarcerated in Texas, and we had a hand in getting that started.
Yes.
So folks can see you daily on 3TV, is that right? Are you a weekday reporter?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, in the evenings?
When bad stuff happens, I'm usually...
But you were at Phoenix Comic-Con as well, so you can't say...
I think that's not a bad thing, that's fun.
How do you... I mean, I could talk to you forever, and we're going to do another few minutes here. So you go to crime scenes, murder scenes, etc., but then you go to Comic-Con. How do you... Is there any mental prep at this point, or is it just clocking in, clocking out?
Yeah, mental prep, I think that...
Like, you walk into a Comic-Con and you see somebody, like, carrying a prop bloody axe, and you're like, there he... Oh, no, wait, okay, it's cool, we're good.
Flashback to that serial killer.
The river of blood in it.
I think it's fun to have.
I prefer covering the heavy stuff, there's no doubt. I sort of... maybe it's because I worked for a current affair. I swore off doing basically fluffy celebrities and sports stars. Hate doing that stuff.
Sure.
Have no interest in covering celebrities and sports stars. Do a lot of that. But I like covering real stories, real dramas. But, you know, bopping into Comic-Con is always a good time.
So Brett's got to be a breath of fresh air.
We ran into each other once upon a time.
Absolutely did. I got a great picture of us together that I treasure.
I love that. I love
Cool.
Comic-Con.
Mike, thank you so much for doing the show.
Hey, listen,
I really appreciate
it's
it.
fun to be here, and I'm glad. I hope this thing works. I hope this goes a long way for you, because I think there's a lot of talent in Phoenix and a lot of creative people, and I think we need more sort of grassroots venues to talk about.
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, brother.
Thank you very much.